This video is the first in what is going to be a set of videos demonstrating some techniques and best practices on how to build a 3D car in 3D Studio Max. So we're going to be looking at various stages in the production, from pre-production to gathering source assets and setting up your 3D scene, and right through to modeling the vehicle and modeling the additional details like the bumpers, the mirrors, etc. So it's worth noting that this tutorial won't really be a step-by-step guide, because that's obviously going to take a very long amount of time to create and watch that. Rather, this is designed for somebody who's more familiar with modeling in 3D and wants some pointers on best practices working on this project. So if we think at the very beginning about 3D cars, the first thing you might think of would be something like this, and you might sort of aspire to create something that's this level of detail and this level of polish. The truth is, this is something that's really had a great deal of attention put into it and has taken many hundreds of hours to produce. So really we want to think about producing something a bit more realistic, at least for this video. And what I'll try and do is suggest ways to start low poly, get into intermediate, and then even into high poly, and then at the very end make some suggestions about how you could start using turbo smooth to add extreme details and a highly refined model. So at the very low end you might expect to see something that looks similar to this. So this would be extremely low resolution, and we're looking to start with this but really move on quite quickly into a higher resolution model. So if we move on, a slightly higher detail, this is getting closer to what we want to develop, but again there's really not enough detail around the windows, around the lights, so we're looking to add even more detail than this. So this is kind of the thing that we're trying to aspire to. This is what we're trying to create. And you can see that it's not extremely high detail because the polys are quite large, but it has enough divisions and enough detail to make out windows, the wing mirrors, and some fairly nice detail in the wheels there. This model has not been smoothed, and it's not ready to be smoothed either. We'll talk about using smoothing techniques like turbo smooth later, and really why you should avoid using those techniques unless you're prepared to put in an extreme amount of time on this model. So moving up then to another example. Again, this is a medium high resolution model, and I'm not entirely sure. I think this might be ready to be smoothed, but in its current state you can see how the polys are still quite large and how this model is not being smoothed, but it's got a good amount of detail to suggest what the vehicle is, the model that it is, and it doesn't go too high in detail essentially. If you were to go to the extreme high resolution stage, then you'd see something more like this, and at first glance you might think, well, that looks just like the previous model. However, you can see where on the seams and in the creases the mesh starts to get very dense, and that's because this model has been prepared for smoothing. So this model's been taken to the next level, and while it might be deceptive at first glance, you think it's the same, it's actually had a great deal more time put into it to prepare it for smoothing. And on the very extreme end you'd see something like this, which again, this is the smoothed version of something similar to what we just saw. And you can see how dense the wireframe is near the creases and around the details, especially in the wheels. And this is the kind of detail that you need to add in if you want to start smoothing your model. So in this tutorial we're really not going to be aiming to get this high in detail, just because of the sheer amount of time it takes to produce something like this. But at the very end I'll suggest some best practices for taking your model to this next stage. For this example though, we're really going to be trying to create something that's closer to this. So let's look at how we can start this project by first sourcing some imagery and setting up image planes inside 3D Studio.